Hi there. Welcome to another presentation of the Globe Sound Healing Conference. Now we have Neil Gaur. Welcome, Neil.
Thank you so much, David. So good to be here with you, brother.
Great. What have you been up to lately?
Oh man, I would say that there's been a lot of inward reflection this year. I put on a lot of events every year, but this year I'm not doing any live events. Just kind of settling into really what my next steps are and going really deep within to do some inner work, confront some childhood issues that I never dealt with.
Mm.
So this year for me is another layer of shadow work, but also just sitting with myself. Because I feel like we're moving into a time now where we're being presented with stepping into the most authentic version of ourselves, and we can teeter-totter into both worlds, and it might be a little uncomfortable. So I'm kind of just taking things a little slower to see what my next steps are in life.
Excellent. Neil is the founder of Portal to Ascension, a conscious event production company created in 2008 that hosts a wide range of presenters on a variety of topics such as the origins of humanity, the existence of extraterrestrial life, exposing hidden truths, and exploring the nature of reality. He travels the world facilitating gatherings that are intended to empower the individual to reclaim their sovereignty and awaken to their full potential. He hosts, creates, and facilitates over 70 conferences, workshops, and retreats each year. At this point, Portal to Ascension has worked with over 3,000 researchers, spiritualists, scientists, consciousness explorers, and more. Neil is a philosopher, historian, researcher, and spoken word artist. He presents his research on the ancient wisdom and future science of sound, vibration, and frequency, as well as in-depth explorations into ancient civilizations, archaeological discoveries, space anomalies, shedding light on hidden esoteric wisdom, and exploring ways in which we create unity, peace, and peace on earth. Wow.
Yes.
It just occurred to me reading that, I've done now, this is our 18th Sound Healing Conference. And I think when you do conferences, you learn more than just about anybody. I mean,
That is so true.
it's like, we get such a wide perspective, and then people think that we are like really amazing. And it's really, we've just learned from everybody else.
100%. Just to speak on that for a second, nowadays, if I'm curious on a topic, I will create a conference on that topic and learn about it. So I did a whole conference on Atlantis, a 2-day conference, 22 hours on Atlantis. And I knew a little bit about Atlantis, but after that, I could probably get like a PhD in it. So it's a great position to be in.
Excellent. Okay, so here's the big question. If you
Let's do
had
it.
all the money in the world, what would you do to help people?
I feel that I would want poverty and income inequality to end. I want everybody to be able to live a life of abundance. And if you're saying I had unlimited funds,
Hmm.
that means we could honestly, hopefully there can be a day we don't need to exchange monetary income, but hopefully we can get to a point where everybody can be fed, have a roof over their head, be taken care of, and instead of being in fight or flight and struggling all the time, that we could focus on things that really matter, which is our own connection to our families, ourselves, and taking care of the planet.
Excellent. I think that's like one of the best answers I've heard because, it's hard to even imagine. So what I did is I actually put together a whole movie to actually visualize it and see it happening. So because if you can't visualize it, you can't manifest it.
Yeah,
Cool. Excellent.
exactly.
Okay. So tell us what your presentation's about.
All right, so when I first got into this realm of spirituality consciousness, my first introduction was doing sound healing events back in 2008. I was doing Tibetan bowls, gong didgeridoo experiences up and down the coast of California. And as I was doing that, I was also simultaneously learning about ancient civilizations and the true history of humanity. And since I was raised Hindu, I was immediately interested in the frequency medicine that they were using in the East. And I connected the two together and I realized that all these ancient civilizations had some sort of awareness of the fact that we're all vibratory beings, almost like that they knew a really primordial understanding of quantum physics, that we're all frequency and vibration. So as I started looking through that, I realized that across the board, almost every civilization I came across had an origin story that incorporated sound. So this presentation here today is going to take everybody on a journey across the world, as many places that we can fit in that time. I think around 7, 8 different locations, and we're going to look at the understanding that these ancient beings had, these civilizations had of sound frequency and acoustics, and what that really represented. Not just the fact that we could see, okay, these structures, they definitely had acoustics in mind, right? But why they created these structures, what was the possibility for this? Was it to achieve some sort of enlightened state? Was it for healing? Was it for communication with the gods? So we're going to go on an exploration of all that today.
Excellent. Let's check it out. See you on the other side.
See you there. Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Neil with Portal to Ascension, and I'm so honored and blessed to be a part of this event. I've been following David's work for quite some time, so to be a part of this is truly a beautiful dream come true. And today, but this is going to be about ancient civilizations and their knowledge and awareness of sound. Because as you probably already know, is that our ancients were much more advanced and aware, especially spiritually enlightened, than in many ways that we are now. And they had a great understanding of who we are, not maybe not every ancient civilization, but much of them, many of them did, who we are, where we came from, and our connection to the celestial frequency of sound and where we all came from. Even the origin stories, who created the origin stories? Well, the ancient beings, of course, the ancient civilizations. And in these origin stories, what are some of the representations that we get? And we'll get into this in the presentation. Is in the beginning there was sound. There was the word, right? And that the word is from John 1:1 in the Old Testament. That we're also speaking about sound and frequency. So today we're going to explore what are some of the ancient structures, ancient civilizations, and what was their awareness of sound and vibration. But before we get into all that, I always love to start my presentations out with why? Why are we talking about this, right? And this quote right here really says it all for me. The forms of snowflakes and faces of flowers may take on this shape because they're responding to some sound in nature. Likewise, it is possible that crystals, plants, and human beings may be in some way music that has taken on visible form. And just take that in for a second. Just the depth of this quote, that it is possible that plants, humans, us, crystals, are we sound? Are we frequency that has taken on visible form? And I would say that now with quantum physics and new advancements in science, that we're starting to realize there's so much truth to that. I'd love to start out by laying out some ground facts, just some things that we can all accept that are most likely, if not 100% real, and have been quantifiable and proven, so that we can create a foundation for everything that we're going to get into now. Firstly, we are vibratory energy beings. Yes, do you agree? We are vibratory energy beings. Now, on the subatomic level, we're now pierced through the atom, and we realize subatomically, everything below an atom, we are continuously vibrating. Everything is vibrating. Even the desk in front of you, whatever is around you, vibrates. But we can only perceive it as solid, and that's a whole other story of why that is. Our brains produce electricity. There's a type of acid in our brain that moves around, generates an electric current. This electric current goes through our synaptic connectors and neural pathways in our brain down to the rest of our body. So our brain is producing an electricity that is in essence fueling our body. Vibration and frequency is measured in hertz. On Earth, at this time, in this incarnation, we measure everything in hertz. The universe is singing. There's frequencies everywhere. There's inaudible frequencies. There is frequencies that you can hear. There's constant melody of the spheres. Humans have lived on Earth for hundreds of thousands of years, more than widely accepted. Now, the rest of them have been provable through science. Now, this one, I say, has been proven, but it's also a lot of pushback on this from mainstream archaeologists, stating that that's not the case. But there's all these types of anomalies that are showing up that are providing evidence that we have been on this planet much longer than we have been told and that we thought we have been. And what normally happens is when something comes that is a smoking gun that could throw off the regular mainstream accepted linear timeline of our evolution, many times is pushed under the rug in order to maintain the status quo and maintain what is out there right now in our history books. But pretty soon, we're going to all understand and accept the history of humanity. Today, we're going to speak about some of that diversity. So, ancient Homo sapiens and Homo erectus. There is no evidence, right? This is one of the reasons why, um, I guess, alternative archaeologists and spiritualists and others are saying that something occurred from our Homo erectus, from the being that we were before we became Homo sapiens sapien. There seemed to be a quantum leap in evolution. And one of the reasons is there is no evidence of transitionary fossils in the fossil record. That all other species that we see evolving, we see them slowly morphing and transitioning into another species. Instead, we see a quantum leap from Homo erectus to Homo sapiens sapien almost like overnight. Darwinism is still a theory because it has not been proven, and researchers have been searching for 150 years to see if they can find a transitionary fossil for these two species. Two sides of the coin here, one extreme and the other extreme. There's evolution, which is, I feel, on one extreme, and there's creationism, which is on the other extreme, that everything was just created. From my research, it seems like the truth is somewhere in between, that there was evolution and there was creationism. But what was creationism? What was that spark? Was it something that happened on the planet? Was it divine intervention? Were we visited by interdimensional beings? Those are the questions that we still have. And there's a lot of ancient scriptures that speak on that. But that's not today's topic. So continuing, why sound? All ancient religions and origin stories talk about sound. If they all talk about sound, why don't we look at why they're talking about it? We only hear and see a limited frequency range. We only have a specific bandwidth limitation of the frequencies we're able to hear, feel, see, touch, on all of that. So are we not curious what is beyond that? What is below that? Countless inaudible frequencies are around us always. There's all these frequencies. Some of them are affecting us, some of them aren't. And most of them we can't even perceive or see. So having an understanding and a grasp on sound will only provide more of an ability to know what is around us and moving forward more intentionally in the world. Now, this is a snapshot intersection of your organs and the chakra system. Now, in our spine, there is, in the neural foramen, it's an opening between every two vertebrae where the nerve roots exit the spine. The nerve roots travel through to reach the rest of your body. Without the foramen, nerve signals could not travel to and from the brain to the rest of your body. Without nerve signals, your body would not be able to function. So I used to think that the chakras were just some energetic centers, metaphoric, metaphysical centers, but quite literally, they are actually in existence. Those areas do exist. So as I shared earlier, your brain creates an electrical current right here, travels down your spine, and the neural foramen are the openings in the spine where the nerves come out, and then the signal, the brain signal, the information, plus the electrical current is traveled through these nerves into the organs. And what do? They provide data, and they also provide the electricity for it to live, to survive, or you can say the frequency. These centers of our spine are where? They're where the chakras are. And what are the organs that it connects to? Well, all the organs that we've correlated each chakra to, right? You can go down here, the lungs and the heart are coming out of the heart chakra. So there is quite a literal frequency in Hertz coming out into these organs over there. So it only makes sense that we're able to disturb that frequency, we're able to heal that frequency and align that frequency. So now let's get into it. Sound and resonance in all creation stories. So I've gone through hundreds of creation stories in order to try to figure out if there's any similarities between them all. And I found quite a few, but one of the main, I would say the number one similarity that I discovered was the communication and conversation around sound. Many creation myths begin with God speaking or singing the universe into being. In conventional science, right, some people forget to realize that even the term for the Big Bang is literally a representation of a sound. The Big Bang is an adjective, it's not a noun, right? It's a description of what happened. The Big Bang, it exploded. The universe was sung into creation. The Egyptians have that one. Hinduism, Om, and the seed sound for each chakra. Om is at 432 hertz, and each chakra sound correlates to the frequency of that chakra. So even in Hinduism, Om was the celestial primordial sound. It was the sound before all sounds. It's what all frequency and all creation came from. Many ancient civilizations, sound was a huge component. Singing, chanting, allowing beings to get to a level of consciousness where they're able to not only heal and align themselves, but in many situations, communicate with the gods. Here's another quote. In the center of the universe, she sang. In the midst of the waters, she sang. In the midst of heaven, she sang. In the center, she sang. Her singing made all the worlds of the spirits, the worlds of the people, the worlds of the creatures, the worlds of the gods. In this way, she separated the quarters. Singing, she separated. Upon the face of heaven, she placed her song. Upon the face of water, she placed her song. Thus she placed her song. Thus she placed her will. Thus wove she her design. Thus sang the spider. Thus she thought. This quote is probably my favorite quote. Now, when I read this, think of this in the term of science, in terms of quantum physics. What is this quote really saying? Right? Let's break it down a little bit. In the center of the universe, she's saying. Center of the universe, the frequency, the word. In the middle of the water. Now, a lot of times in ancient texts, they call space, the universe, the second ocean. In the midst of the heavens, the universe, she's saying. Her singing made all the worlds. The frequency made all the worlds. The worlds of the spirits, the worlds of the people, the worlds of creatures, and the worlds of the gods. The frequency made the world of the gods. This is how we separated the quarters, the duality, singularity becoming duality. Upon the face of heaven, she placed her song. Upon the face of water, the frequency was everywhere, created in her image. Thus she placed her will, her desire, her intention. Thus wove her she design, sacred geometry. Thus sang the spider, fractalized sacred geometry. Thus she thought, the original thought. Let me experience myself other than what I already am. This quote is from the Laguna Pueblo native tribe. And this origin story, you can tell, not only is it about sound, right? It has all the key components. It has sacred geometry in there, has quantum physics. It's a beautiful poetry describing how we all came from sound. Everything, even the realm of the gods. The Australian Aborigines speak of sacred songs, the song paths sung by the primordial ancestor spirits who walked across the landscape, singing its landforms into being. Then we have obviously the days of creation, 6 aspects of the Om, the 6 solfeggio tones, the 6 aspects of the all-seeing eye of Horus. And in an ancient text called Krishna Yaruveda, here's a quote, and let me know if you or just note to yourself or in the chat if you know where this quote's from. In the beginning was Brahman, with whom was the Word, and the Word is Brahman. Doesn't that sound very familiar? Of course, because right below it is the text in the Old Testament. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. Well, firstly, how can these two supposedly different faiths and religions have almost the same exact text? Where does it originally come from? And then secondly, the Word is Brahman. In the beginning was Brahman, who was the Word. So the Word was there in the beginning. And what a lot of people that are probably within these faiths neglect to realize is the Word is a representation of sound, spoken to existence. And here is the full verse here. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Well, this is very interesting because we've firstly been introduced to the universal paradox, the first paradox of creation. The Word was with God. There were two separate things. Well, first of all, in the beginning was the Word before there was anything else. And then the Word was with God, but the Word was also God at the same time. It's the two and the one always existing as the two at the same exact moment. He was with God in the beginning. Now, this is where a lot of people get lost. He, people think, is talking about God. No, he is sound. The Word was with God in the beginning. Through the Word, all things were made. Without the Word, nothing was made that has been made. In him, who's him? We're still talking about the Word, was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. So now we're going to jump over to ancient Egypt. This video here is from a colleague of mine, good friend that I've had a Portal to Ascension a few times. His name's Robert Schock, and this video is going to explain the a little bit of the history of Egypt and showing us that Egypt is much older than we've been told it is.
And what we found is that we had uneven weathering around the Sphinx. What this suggests, doesn't just suggest, I mean, it's very evident to me, the Sphinx was actually carved out initially on three sides. Then it was later fully carved in the back. This level of weathering, which is much more shallow in the back, is compatible with and compares well with the subsurface mineralogical changes. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about subsurface weathering that we have for other Old Kingdom, dynastic, Fourth Dynasty tombs and structures that are supposedly contemporaneous with the original Sphinx. Does everyone follow? The fact that you have much, much deeper weathering around the other three sides indicates that this was carved out earlier. The body was carved out earlier. And actually what happens when you look there is that initially, you see how you have the older weathering here? The Sphinx was only carved down to this point approximately initially, so it emerged out of the bedrock, and then I believe in the Fourth Dynasty, about 2500 BC, they were not carving the Sphinx originally, they were recarving parts of it, including the head, sometime in dynastic times, along the back, etc. So initially, the Sphinx actually emerged from the bedrock, which is interesting because in the age of Leo, about 10,000 BC, when the Sphinx sits due east, at that time in the age of Leo, what rose on the horizon due east on the vernal equinox? The constellation Leo. But I think it's interesting that it's compatible and seems to tie in with my dating. My dating currently for the core portion of the Sphinx, the core body of the Sphinx, is about 10,000 BC.
10,000 BC, that's around 12,000 something years ago, around 12 to 13,000 years ago, the time of what we know as the Great Flood, the time of the end of the Younger Dryas period, the end of the last ice age, where there was either a solar flare or an asteroid impact or something that happened on Earth that created a worldwide catastrophe. Now we see that the erosion on the Sphinx and the location of the Sphinx in which way it was heading seems to all align with around 13,000 years ago and was facing the constellation of Leo, which is why the face was a lioness at the beginning. The date that we've been given for the Sphinx is only around 3,000, 4,000 years ago from now. So this actually takes it back another seven to 10,000 years more than what we've been told, right? The reason for that is to really look at how old is our civilization really, how old is humanity here, and how long ago were we aware of some advanced information that we consider advanced now, including the fact that you and I have frequencies, and how do we utilize these frequencies for the betterment of ourselves and the planet. And Egypt, you needn't go no further than Egypt to see so many great advancements and anomalies that we're yet to even really understand of how and what they used it for. We can see that these things were probably used for multiple situations, but their level of genius is something that we don't give enough credit to globally within the mainstream, so that we can really explore what they knew and how we can maybe even harness it and use that information now. And another great example in Egypt is the pyramids on the Giza Plateau. Now, if you want to know more about this information, look up the Pyramid Code on Netflix, 5-part series. But it seems like these pyramids were utilized for multiple things, including having frequency and vibration in mind. Now, underneath the pyramids, there are aqueducts that would collect water. And what would happen on occasion? The Nile River, firstly, through geological observation, was actually on the other side of the Giza Plateau that it is now, but then it eventually moved to where it is. And what would happen is the Nile River would overflow during specific times of the year, and that overflow would go into the aqueducts below the pyramids in the Giza Plateau. The aqueducts had copper rods that were going into the ground, and what would happen to the aqueducts is it would create what a frequency, an electrical current through rushing into the aqueducts. The electrical current would then go into the copper rods, and the copper rods would pick up that frequency, and it would take that vibration and move it in to the pyramid, which was basically a frequency technology utilized for probably communication, for maybe even generating electricity, from transportation. Who knows all the different possibilities that they're using it for. But it was an acoustic, organic, if you will, generator that would take this frequency. Now, when it would go into the pyramids, it would end in the pyramid into hollowed out tubes, thereby converting the frequency of electricity into a sound vibration as it would enter certain chambers within the pyramid. So what else could they have used sound for in Egypt? Some people say sound was used to create megalithic structures. There's a papyrus from 2600 BC stating that the Pyramid of Giza was created in 20 years. The pyramid contains 2.3 million individual blocks of stone, meaning one block would have to be laid every 5 minutes of every hour, 24 hours a day for 20 years. So, but the problem with that is each block weighs at least 2 tons. So that's over 1,764,000 pounds of stone being laid every day for 20 years. If that papyrus is talking about the truth of how long it took to make that, it couldn't have been done by just human labor, even with thousands of slaves or whatever they say they had. That's not quite possible. So could it have been done with levitation, or not? Or was it built in 26, or was it not built in 2600 BCE? Was it some older technology, or a combination of both? Also, the Egyptian language is created in a way to emphasize specific frequencies, just like Sanskrit and other languages around the world. It was a frequency language that would also held a lot of activations and abilities in forms of communication. Now, vowels were not even introduced into the Egyptian language until much later. They may have used vowels in day-to-day speak, but in their ancient texts and hieroglyphics, we don't see them using vowels. It was all consonants until quite a long time later, from the inception of the Egyptian civilization. And then again here at the bottom, sound frequency is generated by aqueducts that turn into sound frequency when entering the pyramid. Energy generating devices sending frequencies into the structure, and for what purpose? Those experiments conducted by a guy named Tom Danley in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid that suggest the pyramid was constructed with a sonic purpose. Danley identifies 4 resonant frequencies or notes that are enhanced by the structure of the pyramid and by the materials used in its construction. The notes start from F sharp chord, while according to ancient Egyptian texts were the harmonic replica of Earth. These things were also musical instruments designed, like when you go inside the Great Pyramid, you feel like you're inside an instrument. His tests also showed that these frequencies are present in the king's chamber even when no sound is being produced. Okay, this is important. That not only was these structures created in a way to cultivate these specific frequencies without a dial, a knob, just naturally, but even when there's no sound being produced, the wind in itself going through that area creates a lower octave of that sound and that frequency, that it still is in existence. And we're going to see that from some of these other ancient sites I'm going to show you, that they're all created in a similar way. That even when you're not making a noise in there and it's just the wind, the frequency still exists just from the wind blowing through. Now, this video here is a video of showing stones levitating, just to kind of drill home the point that this technology of levitating stones isn't really far off. We're able to do this now. And then ultimately, how did they do it? Did they have technology? Or were they at a level of consciousness that they were able to use their own consciousness to do this as well? So let's take a look. It's not far-fetched to think that this is a possibility. Now, this one is in the Red Pyramid in Egypt with a colleague, Brian Forrester, and this is them going inside to test the harmonics of inside one of this pyramid.
This is the entrance to the Red Pyramid. We're going down the shaft and we're going to go into these incredible rooms, which are acoustic chambers. Forget about the idea of tombs, think sound and vibrational technology. Of the main chambers of the Red Pyramid, and it is tuned to A. That seems to be the sound that it likes the best.
So you can see in that last video with Brian Forrester that just by going in there and chanting, whatever voice and vocal tone that you're chanting, whatever frequency is coming out of you, that structure designed in a way to mirror back that frequency and always change it to A, the note A, right? So just imagine what level of advancement and genius you need to be at in order to create a structure that has that ability, right? What kind of technology is that? And just to drill home even further, how much of a genius that these individuals were, that not only were they providing advanced science and awareness in the structures and the way they built it, but even their artwork. I would say that the Egyptians had a really amazing right-left brain hemisphere connection, masculine, feminine energy, the science, the linearity, and also the creativity and expression. And in much of their artwork, they actually embed very advanced scientific concepts here. You can see the Eye of Horus that we have an image of right here is actually a cross intersection of how the pituitary and the pineal gland area looks like in our brain. How did they know that, right? Not only how did they know that, but how amazing is this artwork that also represents the third eye, that is exactly how the shape looks inside of our third eye, pituitary gland, the crown chakra, and the pineal gland. And this connection goes even further because the way they made this artwork also represented musical intervals and mathematic intervals. Now, music being the creative force in the expression and the feminine force, whereas mathematics being the linear expression, the facts behind it all, and also the masculine energy behind it. And they really figured out a way to bring both of them together, which is quite possibly the reason why so many people are baffled by it, because you have to be at a level of really being open to understanding the balance between both polarities and dualities, and how they utilized that and showed that in their expression of their artwork, the ancient structures, their technology, their spirituality. As I shared earlier, vowels were not used in the ancient world. Ancient Egyptians thought they were so sacred that they left them out. The vowels got introduced within Eastern cultures' variations of chants and healings of spiritual ascension. And we see the introduction of vowels. And when we first see it being introduced it's being utilized for healing, alignment, chanting, empowerment. Now we're jumping over to South Africa, moving away from Egypt, going all the way south down Africa to a place called Adam's Calendar. Over here, there's these stone structures, there's thousands of them. Take a look at them down there. Scientific evaluation has shown that the circular structures are energy generating devices using the natural sound harmonic frequencies that emanate from the surface of the earth. These structures were designed in a way to utilize the natural frequency coming out of the earth at that place, C sharp. All stones there are made out of dolerite that is also not natural to the region. So these aren't random occurrences. These were made by something. And they're estimated to be at least 75,000 years old. The shape of these structures are very interesting because they're all very specific. There's thousands of them. And each of them represents the geometrical shape of sound energy. These are cymatic patterns. And it seems almost like somebody had a technology to allow for this structure to come out of the ground that represents the natural frequency of that area, the cymatic pattern of that area. And beneath these structures, many of them are ancient gold mining operations. They show evidence that these structures may have been utilized in ancient gold mining operation. So if they're already 75,000 years old, who was gold mining 75,000 years ago? We are told that we were extremely primitive just around 9,000 years ago. That 9,000 years ago was when we started having written language and started having agriculture, right? So there is a huge anomaly here that doesn't fit with mainstream linearity of our timeline of human history. And these structures not only are connected to different sound vibrations, but also there's an advanced awareness of our star system here. And Adam's calendar in particular aligns with Orion and the stars within Orion's belt, including a few other stars in Orion, which to me is very interesting because all the way north of Adam's calendar, all the way north, where do you get? On the other side of Africa, you get the pyramids of Giza, which are also aligned with Orion. Now you go all the way to the south of Africa, and you have Adam's calendar, also aligned with Orion. And now both of these structures were built with frequency in mind. The frequencies in this area go into the gigahertz level, over 380 gigahertz, okay, which is unheard of on Earth in any normal applications. That frequency is not able to be created naturally on Earth. This vanished civilization had a great understanding of energy that still escapes us today. Now, we're moving all the way to India, to another part of the world. Now, in India, there is evidence of sound and vibration being utilized everywhere. And I started this whole presentation going into depth on the different places, different ways Hinduism has incorporated sound with the chakra sounds, with Om being the primordial sound. A lot of frequency information there. Even meditation has to do with raising your frequency. Sound healing, Tibetan bowls coming from that part of India, right? But also the ancient structures. And one of the greatest places that represents this is a place in Hampi, India, where there's a temple dedicated to the deity Vitala. And this is what that temple looks like, and this is the location of it in India. Here it is. Now, Vitala is an interesting place because it's actually a hybrid being, a hybrid deity that is a representation of two beings coming together, Shiva and Vishnu. Both come together to create a hybrid called Vitala. Now, Shiva has a drum and is always playing the drum, and the drum sound is Om. Vishnu has a conch, and the conch makes an Om. They just create different octaves of the same sound, Om. Constructed during King Devaraya II's reign in the 14th century, the musical pillars there are one of the biggest highlights of this whole area, called the musical pillars of the Ranga Mantapa. The large Mantapa is renowned for its 56 musical pillars. These musical pillars are also known as the Saregama pillars. Saragama pillars. And let's watch the video of this. So these pillars, 56 pillars there, and they play like instruments. These pillars are designed to imitate the sound of different instruments, including drums and string instruments. So not just drums, right? In the beginning, you might have thought somebody was playing drums, but they were playing one of the pillars. No matter what the instrument sounds like, if it's a string-like instrument, if it's a drum-like instrument, each pillar followed the same exact notes of the Indian classical scale. Sa, re, ga, ma. Saregama is the eastern version of solfeggio. So, re, mi, da. Saregama is the eastern scale of it all. Saregama also connects to the chakras from the root to the crown. So, what these pillars are literally saregama pillars that emanate that frequency depending where you hit it, different instruments, and then it's also a journey from the root chakra to the crown. In this temple dedicated to who? To Vishnu and Shiva coming together, which are the primordial forces, two of the Trinity that literally created the universe, that also has a representation of the Om sound. And the crown chakra sound and the third eye sound are both Om. So what you're doing is by playing these instruments, by playing these pillars, you're going through a journey from the root chakra all the way to the eventual Om, which represents Vishnu and Shiva. So just imagine, just again, the complexity, the ingeniousness of these individuals to create something like that. And here is just an image really quick of the saregama scale and each of the notes that each of these sounds represent. So when the British went to Hampi, India, and they went and discovered this, and when they found this, they were amazed, of course, and they wanted to know what kind of technology was utilized to create it. So they got one of the pillars, they cut it open to see what was inside, and all they could see was just stone. They couldn't figure out how it was done. So it's not like these stones were something was done within them in a specific way that we can observe that shows that they did this in order to create a specific sound frequency. We can't even really understand the level of technology that they had in order to do this. We see this all over the world. Even in Palenque, there's something very similar to that. And just like in Egypt, in the King's Chamber, the last place that we were at in Hampi, India, is another place where you play the frequency. You don't have to play the frequency, but the wind going through that structure in itself emanates the frequency on an octave that is inaudible. So imagine ancient people in back in the 14th century and after meditating in these structures where the frequencies that they're being bombarded with are from the wind or even from their own chanting or even from playing these structures are giving them a full chakra bath, activating, just like I showed you in the beginning of these presentations, those neural foramen areas in where your nerves are coming out to all your organs, activating and aligning it so it could be utilized for many things, right? In these situations, many of these situations, I feel they created these places to convene with what they believed was God or some sort of source or connection. But in other places, including in Egypt, in King's Chamber, these places could have been used as healing centers, healing places. So now we're in Mexico, in Palenque, Mexico, one of my favorite sites there. And you can see this is not even a fraction of Palenque, Mexico. And in Palenque, in the Chiapas state, there's two specific areas. There's one of the excavated areas here, and then there's a whole other area of 1,400 plus temples and pyramids that are unexcavated. You can go down one route or the other route. You go down one route, you get to this, which is still only a fraction of it. You go to the other route, which is behind this. You're trekking through the jungle, walking on top of pyramids, and I got to do both. I'm going to skip this video for time, but in this video is just like me basically going through and walking over these temples and pyramids there. But what Palenque was used for was it was a central hub for trade, commerce, diplomacy, and foreign affairs. Many ethnic groups were represented here. May have been an area for global affairs and great minds to share ideas. In Palenque, there's a big pyramid structure in the middle that was specifically for all the intellectuals, scientists, and mathematicians and astronomers. They would get there, they would discuss matters, they would create civilization, they would come up with policy. It was the foundational place for the Mayan civilization. There's some stories that say that this place is one of the oldest places, that whole area really around Palenque too. And what would happen is different tribes from around the world at one point had all convened in Palenque. And the story goes that the Mayan civilization is actually many other civilizations dating back all the way to 3000 BCE coming together in order to share ideas of how to live and the best ways and best practices and creating a new civilization that eventually became the Maya people as they started living together and mating with each other and having children. And this story resonates very truly to me because it seems like that a lot of the Mayan ancient ways are components that we see from all over the world coalesced into one. And if you know anything about the cycles of time, which we'll get into in the end here, the ups and downs and the upturns and downturns in consciousness, it seems like every time we exit one age and go into another age, especially during a devolution process, that tribes from specific civilizations around the planet, they leave that planet and attempt to maintain the consciousness of the age that they just left. Meaning that they leave and they take their wisdom with them because their society civilization is quite literally going downhill or devolving. And I feel that the Mayan civilization was a place that was birthed from a lot of these tribes leaving from around the world, coming into the Yucatan Peninsula and coalescing with their wisdom from the older age of spiritual awareness and attempting to create something new. Now, this is the top part of the pyramid in which the astronomers and the scientists and all of them would gather together and basically come up with policies and information and research on how to create this Mayan civilization.
But you see that slab right there, and the slab on the right hand side, those are actually part of the roof originally. This whole thing had a roof over it. And even though they're solid rock, and we have a clip that I'm going to look for at home, see if I can plug it in here. When you hit those rocks, they make these harmonics, these beautiful harmonics. Whereas when they were over here and as the roof, when they were part of the roof, when it would rain, when there would be wind, and this is like a wind tunnel, like wind would literally come through here. Just the way it's structured, that they would make harmonic sounds on there. And then we would have all the ancient cultures around this area right here getting together to discuss politics, science, astronomy, spirituality, all of that stuff. And at the same time as they're doing that, whenever the wind would come through and it would rain, it would create these frequencies that will basically bombard all these people in here.
So the stone slab right there, if you can see my cursor, that was a part of the roof. This whole roof was covered. This stone slab right there, if you played the stone slab just like we did in Hampi, India, it does the same thing. Dun-dun-dun-dun. It's like an instrument. It's a sound frequency device. Also, you cut it open, just stone, right? What's going on with this thing? Well, it was on top of the roof. When wind would come through, the way they created these structures with these, you can see a window right here. The way they created these structures with the wind coming through was done in such a good way that it would create good ventilation, like a natural AC for sure, but it would also create a constant frequency current from the structures that were emanating sound. So this roof, when it would rain, when there would be wind, would just be emanating this sound. Now, this frequency. Now, who is sitting below it? The astronomers, the spiritualists, the scientists, the politicians that were there to create the civilization, literally created a chamber for themselves to be bombarded with a harmonic frequency that could do nothing but assist them in what they were creating in that area. And now, County Meath, Ireland. 5,000-year-old structure there found to be amplifying the Earth's natural magnetic frequency in that area, which is 110 Hertz. This place was built around 3,200 BCE in the Neolithic period, last part of the Stone Age and older than Stonehenge, even though Stonehenge could be older than what we've been told. So let's just say that it was 3,200 BCE. How did these people create this structure, which is beautiful, and design it in a way that they knew that it was going to emanate 110 Hertz? And even in the island of Malta, if you do a simple search online and you look at places in the world that emanate 110 hertz, you can find it everywhere, even Egypt. This is a worldwide phenomena. All these structures designed to emanate 110 hertz. And we'll get into why in a second. February 17, 2012, Vancouver Archaeoacoustics Convention, mainstream convention, not into the esoteric world. Archaeologists, anthropologists, scientists get together to discuss the sound and resonance properties of ancient sites. They went to Malta, the frequency, and discovered there 110 hertz in these caves. So EEG tests were done to see which part of the brain responds to 110 hertz. They discovered it stimulates the area responsible for visuals and creativity. Some participants who were a part of the study claimed to have out-of-body experiences. The researchers detected the presence of a strong double resonant frequency at 70 hertz and 114 hertz as well. So they did further tests, and there was an archaeologist named Fernando that felt, as he was doing these tests, that the sound was crossing his body at high speed, leaving a sensation of relaxation. When it was repeated, the sensation returned, and he also had the illusion that the sound was reflected from his body to the ancient red ochre paintings on the walls. One can imagine the experience in antiquity, standing in what must have been somewhat odorous dark, listening to ritual chanting while low light flickered over the bones of one's departed loved ones. Each volunteer that was a part of the study had their own individual frequency of activation, always between 90 and 120 hertz. Those volunteers with frontal lobe prevalence, okay, this is mainstream, completely validating the esoteric world. Those volunteers with a frontal lobe prevalence during the testing received ideas and thoughts similar to what happens during meditation, while those with occipital lobe prevalence visualize images. He goes on to state, under the right circumstance, ancient populations were able to obtain different states of consciousness without the use of drugs or other chemical substances. These structures, the studies out in Malta, in Egypt, in County Meath, Ireland, depending on the way your brain was structured, this frequency would help you obtain a different state of consciousness, whether it was meditation, relaxation, or quite literally psychedelic images. The Fernando archaeologist had an out-of-body experience where he projected his consciousness onto the wall with the paintings, right? What is going on there? What did they know? What we see a lot of times in ancient structures is that these structures are much older than what we've been told they are or what we think they are. And the reason for this one is that it seems like it became a burial site at one point. And this 110 hertz frequency was almost like a doorway to other, or is a quite literal doorway to other states of consciousness. So by burying your loved ones in there, the thought would be that once they transition and pass on, it's an easier gateway to another state of consciousness. Now, this doesn't mean that's the original intent for what they're made. Most of these were made such advancements much earlier, and then the descendants of these beings or other people that come in at a later point, when we devolved in consciousness, right, as we went through a downturn in consciousness, that's really when they started using them as burial sites, including in Egypt, where we see some sites used as burial chambers, but a lot of sites that they claim were burial sites, we don't see any remains of anybody inside of them. So at this point, there's immense amounts of evidence from ancient scriptures, scientific evaluation of ancient sites, and proof of advanced sound technology, right? That it's harder to disprove that the ancients had advanced awareness of vibration than it is to prove it. There's too much evidence out there. These structures were definitely made with acoustics in mind. Now we're going to close off with speaking a little bit about Pythagoras. Now speaking about an individual rather than a civilization in general. And the Greek mathematician, spiritualist Pythagoras was the father of music therapy. The Pythagorean mystery school on the island of Crotona taught the use of the flute and the lyre as the primary healing instrument. With his monochord, Pythagoras was able to unveil the mysteries of musical intervals. We know that he went to Egypt for at least 10 years and he was initiated to many mystery schools. He was provided an ancient advanced awareness from celestial beings, is another thing that they say about him. Successfully connected geometry, mathematics to music, thereby founding the entire Western music scale. We wouldn't have tuning forks today, we wouldn't have Tibetan bowls today in the way we do with the scales and the notes and the frequencies if it wasn't for Pythagoras. He's not the one that discovered it, he rediscovered it. He went around the world and he brought pieces of information that had been fragmented since the fall, if you can call it that, and he brought it together and coalesced it into something practical and usable in that time and now in modern day world. He considered that music contributed greatly to health. He called his method musical medicine. To the accompaniment of Pythagoras, his followers would sing in unison certain chants. At other times, his disciples employed music as medicine, with certain melodies composed to cure passions of the psyche, anger, aggression, also known as the founder of geometry. His intention was not to discover mathematics and build structures. His intention was to find the frequency of God. He wanted to find how we could cure the passions of aggression and anger. And the island in which he was raised on, there was a dictator there, and he really didn't like the way things that were going down. And he was truly much of a pacifist. He was a vegan. He was a very spiritual individual, and he wanted to find ways in order to heal us from certain passions of the psyche. And the sound frequency was his entrance into all of that, researching it all for many, many years with his followers. And as he was doing that, he then discovered geometry. The geometry is the physical manifestation of the sound. A sound frequency has a geometrical shape, right? And that is how he discovered geometry. And then the equations for geometry, the Pythagorean triangle, and all of that eventually became utilized within our world today and back then in the Roman Empire soon after him in order to create civilization as we know it. But the really beautiful thing is that all the structures that we create, from arches, from bridges, that came from Pythagoras's rediscovery of ancient wisdom, all stemmed from his desire to know consciousness, to know God, to know what frequency is. So he's another individual that had a very good way of looking at the world from a balanced perspective, right and left brain hemisphere, masculine, feminine. And of course, where did he spend a lot of his time? In Egypt. That's where he got a good chunk of his information. Not all of it, but a lot of it. He also theorized that all things have frequencies, even the planets have their own vibration. He called it the music of the spheres. And now we have now seen and that Pythagoras is quite literally right. And I'm not going to get into these videos here for time, but you can look it up online. The sound of the moon, recording of the moon, the sounds of Jupiter. You can look up the sounds of Jupiter, the sounds of Saturn. So Pythagoras was right. The universe is singing. Geometrical shapes, sacred geometry, his rediscovery of sacred geometry that eventually became the practical applications of geometry. Geometrical shapes that are formed from equations that are the same equations of how our universe is created and even how black holes are formed. They represent each dimension of existence too. There's geometrical shapes that represent the frequency of specific dimensions. In my opinion, the flower of life is the geometrical representation of this third/fourth dimension that we're currently in. Utilized in all ancient civilizations and spiritual scriptures. And here's some of the symbols. These symbols aren't new. They're way older than Pythagoras. We see them all over the world, in ancient China, in India. And these ancient symbols here, including the circle to the Vesica Pisces all the way to the flower of life, not only represent how galaxies and nebulae are formed, but also mitosis. So how do these ancient people embed in beautiful art and geometrical art the awareness of how all life is created, right? Information that we would think, well, a lot of people think that we only know how to do now. Well, how do you know how an egg is fertilized? How do you know what it looks like when it splits into two? How do you know what it looks like when it fully becomes fertilized before it starts manifesting human characteristics, right? Well, they knew that, and not only did they know that, they actually created geometry to represent it. And just some more images of the geometry in creation, which goes back to the original quote, is all this physical manifestation, all this physical form, music that is slowed down to take on physical form. Now, I'm going to close out here with just a couple of slides, and I'll do this one last quote since we started with the quote. And I'll just look at this in a way that explains scientifically, since this is a conference, that explains scientifically what is actually occurring within our bodies when we experience sound healing. Every cell pulsates, reflects and interacts with acoustic oscillations of the medium. Even the earth and sun vibrate in unison based on a main rhythm of 160 minutes. Each musical note is therefore united to non-audible notes of higher octaves, and each symphony to other symphonies that we do not hear. And although they make our cells oscillate and possibly resonate, even DNA has its own melody. The musical nature of nuclear matter from atoms to galaxies is now recognized by the official science. Basically, this is how now sound works, how we receive sound. Receptors function as scanners, receptors in our body. They sense molecules on a cellular level. They cluster in cellular membranes, waiting for the right ligand, which is a much smaller molecule than a receptor, to come dancing along, diffusing through and the fluid surrounding each cell. So what we're speaking about here is receptors around the cell, and then the waiting for the right ligand. The ligand is the message carrying in a molecule that the sound that we're receiving. So if you're in a sound healing experience, or everything around you is emanating frequency. So this is how we're constantly getting information from the outside world through frequency. This comes dancing along like a sound. Diffuses through the liquid surrounding our cell. So the ligand's taking this message from the sound. Then the ligand with that sound message mounts the cell, binds with them, and then tickles them to turn on and gets them motivated to vibrate a message into the cell. The ligand carries the sound, tickles the cell opens up if the vibration matches or it has an ability to penetrate through it, and then it vibrates the message: heal, align, match my frequency, whatever the message is. The binding of the ligand to the receptor is likened to two voices striking the same note and producing a vibration that rings a doorbell to open a doorway to the cell. By Candace Pert, PhD. Amazing quote here, basically explaining how not just sound healing, how every vibration throughout the cosmos is affecting us, and how we're this feedback loop and this mechanism to receive information and data from the outside world. Now, what did this all represent? This presentation is on ancient history, ancient civilizations, and I spoke about how there's dip and there's a rise and there's a rise and falling of civilization. It seems that we've been part of this cycle that who knows how long it's been going for, but it's around 25,000 to 26,000 years, around 13,000 years of evolution, 13,000 years of devolution. And this is just a simplification of what that kind of looks like. Now you see that flat plane right there in front of us. That flat plane is the flat plane of the Milky Way galaxy. And the trajectory going all the way down, all the way above, is our solar system. Not only does our solar system do we rotate around our sun, but our solar system also rotates around the central black hole in the center of our galaxy. But as we're doing that, we're quite literally doing a Fibonacci spiral up and down, up and down, up and down over our galaxy. The 13,000 years of each side just coincidentally represents the two sides of the upturn on top of our Milky Way galaxy over the flat plane of the galaxy in the Milky Way, and the downturn. And this represents the evolution of our consciousness. And you can see here that not only do we have the zodiac signs, and you can go back to 10,000 BCE, which is when the Sphinx was supposedly in existence. We see Leo there, and then we have 13,000 years later, we have right around now, which is the end of Piscean age, beginning of the Aquarius age. Now, this is all connected to a vibration frequency of the planet, that we're going through cosmic shifts, galactic weather that is affecting our consciousness and the consciousness of our planet. And as we're doing that, we shift into another age, into a greater awakening and a bigger understanding of who we are. And you can call the dips in consciousness an age of forgetfulness, and then you can call the rises in consciousness the age of remembrance, the great remembrance. So the ancients knew about this information. They rode the waves and the cycles. They built structures during these times. They also built structures in order for us to remember those days. Some of them they attempted to maintain a level of consciousness, even though they knew, because they were in an age of remembrance, they knew during this age of remembrance, we're going to eventually forget. So some of them tried to create structures to keep remembering, including the pyramids and probably including many other places around the world. But eventually, inevitably, those structures switched down because the forgetfulness, the darkness, was always meant to be. The dips in consciousness were a part of this cycle that we signed up for. And now, as we're getting these types of conferences together, as we're speaking about this information, and we're reclaiming our ancient civilizations, wisdom that they had, and we're creating new technology, utilizing the fundamental understanding that you and I, we're not solid beings. We're vibrating frequency. And then the question of, well, why do we even see ourselves as solid? That question in itself has so many layers to unfold for us to realize who and what we truly are. And as we're coming back with all this awareness information, we're at a great awakening. We're at the next level of our consciousness, and it's time for us to remember.
You know, we just know nothing, huh? It's like when I see something like this, it really gives me an idea that there was a level of understanding of how the universe worked
Yeah,
way beyond where we're at. So like the work I'm doing, it's like I think I just need to go, I just want to go home.
yeah.
Right? Because although we're making headway in a different way, I mean, until we remember the structure of how it all works, we're really kind of just playing, which is still cool, and it's all we can do, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's a
so fun.
service, and every way we can do it is all that really
Right.
matters.
But you're right, like we're only scratching the surface, right? And just look at the Pyramid of Giza, like I showed in this presentation, for example. I did not even say maybe 5 to 10% of the anomalies that are that's probably all I shared was like 5% of certain anomalies there. But the whole entire structure, the way it's built, um, it's at a you need to be at a level of consciousness so beyond what we can even fathom to put something together on that level, right?
Yeah.
How do you create a building, but know when you're creating that building that the way you're creating it is going to emanate this specific frequency?
Right, right, exactly. Well, okay, so the main thing everybody talks about is when you resonate the resonant frequencies within the chamber, it will take you into higher states of consciousness. And
Yeah.
Drunvalo talks about that in his book. And it happened to me. You know, when I was in there, I found the three frequencies because there's three main frequencies. There's the left and right walls, the front and back, and ceiling to four frequencies. And I
Hmm.
found all of those frequencies and was toning them. And then I leaned over into the sarcophagus and did a frequency sweep. And when I hit its frequency, it was like, right.
Mm,
And so I laid in the sarcophagus and toned that frequency, and I went out of my body into the Akashic records below the pyramid. And there was a guy there guarding a door, and I said, "Can I come in?" And he says, "No, your consciousness is not high enough." And I'm like, "Oh,
wow.
yeah, shit, bummer." Right. So it was about a half hour later, the tourists cleared out, and I got in the sarcophagus again, and it was much quieter. And I toned it and went out of my body and went down and said, "Can I come in?" And he goes, "Okay." And he opened the door, and energy, which was more like information, came streaming up my spine. And
Hmm.
I completely have been changed the rest of my life. I could do sound way
Oh,
better. It was a major transformation.
wow. How long ago was this?
That was about, God, about 10 years ago. And then my student went last year because she
Hmm.
knew I told her all this. And she actually had chronic fatigue where she could barely get out of bed for 15 years.
Yeah.
And she toned the resonant frequencies and actually said that her whole body disintegrated and then was put back together. And her chronic fatigue from 15 years is completely gone now.
Wow. Yeah, I believe it. So, a year and a half ago, I took two groups of 100 people to Egypt, right, with my friend Alan Steinfeld. And the first group, we had JJ Hertak, JJ and Desiree Hertak. They were the people the tour guides that we were taking on this tour with us. So you can only fit like 50 people in the king's chamber, so we had to do two groups, private access, and we had an hour and a half each. But because I was one of the leaders, I could stay in there for all 3 hours. So we stayed there for 3 hours, and the Hertex, the keys of Enoch, he channeled the keys of Enoch. He got the whole download of Enoch in the king's chamber a couple decades ago. And when he started chanting specific tones that were related to the king's chamber that he got from Enoch, and we did that for 3 hours straight, right? And it got to a point where I couldn't stand up. And after maybe like the second hour, all the walls were vibrating and they looked like it was liquid or water. And then I closed my eyes, and in my mind's eye, I saw a dragon come in from the top of the pyramid and blow fire into my third eye.
Cool.
Yeah, it was honestly the most tangible experience I've ever had of anything consciousness.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, what I did is I did the calculation for the actual frequencies to that you resonate to go into this higher consciousness, which I bet you guys were actually resonating. And what as a physics major, what I discovered is the if you just take the number of feet of the chamber and divide it into 1130 feet per second, you
Yeah.
get a resonant frequency of a space between two parallel walls. So
Wow.
if you divide 17 feet, which is the width, into you get a frequency of 66 hertz, which is a note of C. And then
Mhm.
the length of the chamber is 34. It's also a note of C, an exact octave. And then 19 feet is the note of B at 59 hertz.
Wow.
Yeah. And when you play those, they actually create a dissonant binaural beat, which is
Wow.
exactly what I heard in the King's Chamber when I was toning them. It was like a wah, 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 wah.
So have you made this into a song at all or a frequency we can listen to?
No, I've played them on a keyboard. I've
Okay.
actually played them on a keyboard, but check this out. This is when I was there, I got a download to actually create a chamber that is the King's Chamber with a dodecahedron around it and an octahedron around that. And I now have it working in virtual reality. This is it in virtual reality. And we now have architects that can actually build it. And it's 1-to-1. It's so you can actually put 25 people in the chamber here. This is exactly
Wow.
34 by 17 wide by 19 high.
Whoa.
And when you
So how do you
talk,
emanate the frequency in there? Do you like have
well,
speakers?
well, we can actually create we can cheat a little bit and create like the reflections off the wall, like a basic reverb parameter,
Uh-huh.
so that you could actually resonate it. But if you just tone it, it's still, I mean, just being in it in virtual reality, you get pretty high. And
Yeah.
my guides, the downloads I got actually talked to a psychic, and she said, here's the three beings that gave you these downloads. Do you have questions for them? So for 4 years, I was able to ask them detailed questions on how to build it. And they said it will take you into another dimension. Like they said that you can't have more than 20 people in it because it could explode. And there was a chamber like this in Tijuana in Mexico, and she said like 3,000 people died because they had too many people in it.
Wow.
And if we have more than 5, we have to have people holding prayer.
Because it overloads from the frequency.
Yeah, or any negativity of anybody will be expanded
When you say
drastically.
you have in virtual reality, have you created goggles where people can go
Oh
in?
yeah, I can send this to anybody listening. If you email me, I can send you the link
Yeah.
to it
I'm gonna check it
in
out.
the Oculus. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So another thing I realized when I was there is when you tone the frequencies of any chamber in Egypt, there's hieroglyphs on the walls that are cut into the walls, and the sound bounces off those hieroglyphs and
Mhm.
is refracted back into your body of the hieroglyph.
That is, yeah, I'm honestly speechless. Like every single moment we have a opportunity to speak about Egypt, it just surprises me and amazes me even more. Just the level of intricacy of everything they've created there. Nothing is done unintentionally in Egypt.
Yeah,
Even
right,
like, one other
right.
thing is, if you look at Thoth throughout all of Egypt, all of the images of Thoth, he's holding a staff, right? In every single image, his staff is exactly at 23.5 degrees, right? Which is the
Wow.
tilt of the Earth's axis after
Wow.
the fall. Yeah.
Oh my God. Uh, okay, so a friend of mine actually went to um, Tibet with a monk who he met, and they actually were with the 500 monks that were chanting for an hour and a half, and this huge 20-foot sphere of rock that went floating up into the sky 500 yards and
Hmm.
plugged up a cave, which has been documented actually. So he actually saw it levitate.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so as you shared in the beginning of this conversation here, is we're only scratching the surface of what's going to happen in the future. And to my personal feeling is a lot of this technology has been mastered and is hidden from us. A lot of people have put in the research, and the ones that have put in the research are a lot of privatized companies, a lot of governments. So not only are we discovering things ourselves, but there's going to be, I feel, a disclosure of some very advanced technologies utilizing frequencies and sound, including anti-gravity, which is basically a frequency technology. So in our near future, I feel we're going to exponentially quantum leap jump into a whole new level of technology.
Yeah, I think so as well. I mean, even Sai Baba is known for actually doing sound and manifesting things in his hands. They started actually uh, charging tax on everything he would manifest in his hand. He was manifesting so much. Right. And also one other thing, Freddie Silva, who has
Yeah.
done tours around, but he said he found 111 hertz in 70 sacred sites.
Mm.
And also, I have to tell you just for fun, my address is 110 of my first building. My second building is 108.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. It's interesting when you talk about the frequency and geometry. The main way that people actually compare geometry to sound is by the musical intervals of the sides of the geometries. So if you
Mm.
have a triangle with one side that's 3 lengths and another side that's 2 lengths, that's a 3-to-2 ratio, which is a musical fifth.
Mm.
So one of our instructors actually created a pyramid of all the sides of I'm sorry, chimes of all the sides of the triangles in the Sri Yantra.
Mm. Wow.
Yeah, yeah,
I'd love to see that one.
yeah. Okay, so I got one big question.
Yeah.
Who did the singing
Who did the singing where?
to create the universe?
Man, so it's like it's so
I
interesting.
want to I want to know him.
I know, right? Well, maybe we do know him because the paradox is that all that exists is frequency. Everything is vibration and frequency, and it's all the same energy. So technically, that frequency is that original source. So we are that all the time. But the paradox is we perceive ourselves as not that, right? So it's almost like what is the ascension? What is the evolution? It's the knowingness that we are that, but living in a world where we can operate separately from it. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yes,
Right?
absolutely.
So, but
Absolutely.
then another question I would have is like,
We are God.
how does time work within this whole thing, right? If there was never a beginning, how did it all begin? Our minds are so linearly connected
Mm.
that we always think of something as having to have a start, having an end. But we also know in spirituality that all things exist at one time. But was there really an inception? Was there actually an inception, or was the inception also a part of the illusion? Because that was the beginning of time and space. You get what
Mhm.
I'm saying? So I don't have any answers. I just have more philosophical questions, really,
Right, right, right. It's interesting that they talk about it as a song, because I always think of the hierarchy of vibration as frequencies, combinations of frequencies. There's relationships of frequencies, and then you add time, and now you have a song.
Yeah.
And so that's an actual, uh, when they said they sang it, it was not just a frequency, it was an actual song.
Hmm.
And it's interesting because I think of, if you look at the universe, there's all these movements of the galaxies, which are from the cell all the way to the galaxies, which are songs because they're
Right.
they're transforming. But if you zoom out far enough, the whole universe is a frequency, and
Yeah.
there's other universes that are other frequencies. So you can
Right.
always look at it as a frequency or a song at
Right.
any level,
Yeah.
flow or particle or waves, really.
Yeah, exactly. They're all different octaves of the
Yeah,
original source, right?
yeah.
And how Well, another question I have is how many fractalizations are we from that original source? You know,
Mm.
like if our universe, like we think that we're fractalized. Some people say 13 dimensions from source, which is I have shifted that perspective now. But what if our universe is just one fractalization of another group of universes, right?
Uh-huh.
That goes back to
Uh-huh.
the original source. How how infinite really is everything?
Yeah. I saw an article just recently, a scientific article that said that everything breaks down, and our universe is not breaking down. And that means it has to be an actual AI creation.
Uh-huh. That's a whole other conversation we
Yeah,
can go.
I know. I know. Finally, I think of source as all frequencies.
Yeah.
It's like when
Right.
you're one with the universe, you are all frequencies.
Yeah, I feel that too.
Yeah, yeah. Well, all I can say is, may one day we know all,
Mm.
so we can help everybody and everybody abundant, everybody with everything you said, just completely taken care of, where we're not struggling, and all we need to do is just create and have fun.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. May all beings know peace. May all beings know joy.
What a pleasure. Thanks for your research and detail you put into this. It was excellent.
Thank you, David. I appreciate you, brother.
You too. Take care.